Vanessa Wishstar here, psychic medium, spirit guide, and writer. Sometimes. While I'm doing my sun courting at 6, 7 in the morning on a Saturday, I had this epiphany. I don't even want to call it epiphany. Epiphany feels like that something is coming and I get to own it for a tiny bit. I don't even think it's that. So Steve, what was I talking about?
You were talking about how you were disappointed that you...
Oh, yeah, about the boundaries. Yes, I was disappointed that thank you. I was disappointed that I had boundaries. And I was actually kind of embarrassed by it. But at the same sense, I also realized that, here I come back into Vanessa land. And Vanessa land, was that her? Oh, Vanessa land was very much about autonomy and showing up as this fierce, independent woman of nobody can tread on me, kind of, especially spiritually, ownership, da. And that's a load of shit, to be honest. That's the ego. So, shitfully useful, but temporarily. And the real epiphany is my living example of a life. After the landslide, I had no boundaries. My entire existence was even obsolete. I didn't even know if I was alive for months. And I remember, because when you don't have a home and you're just, I call it middle class homeless. When you don't have a home, you don't have any walls to bound yourself in by, whether you feel safe by that or not. And in that state of ambiguity and restlessness, because you never have a place to rest, you never have a place to come home to lay down, to take a breather and be yourself fully. And when you don't have those walls, you don't seemingly are allowed to have boundaries. It's kind of like the standard. Even when I tried, but I didn't necessarily try at that time, because everything had to be given. Everything. I didn't have anything. I didn't have the ability to be or to live as a human being. So I became radically open in my vulnerability. And I would get knocks on the little apartment that I was staying in. I would go and constantly be wearing my feelings. No matter where I went, I didn't even have clothes to hide me. I didn't have anything to shelter me or umbrella. And this was an incredible experience. And it's still happening today, because I do now have more stable temporary housing, but I don't have anything my own. I don't have the ownership of my own walls. The only thing that I sort of have, which is in debate of also always being taken away, is my fifth wheel, which I am sitting in and just gradually walk to right now, which is my office. But what I just came upon in this last couple weeks is how people have come into my space beautifully, and also me thinking that I need stronger boundaries. I mean, not meaning it's a little blip that I think of, oh, I wish I could do things quietly, and yet there's people. And the irony of this is I am now in Alaska, the place where you think that there's no people, and in the smallest isolated town ever. And yet I have the most people in my life on a more constant basis than I do when I'm in Florida. The reason for that, and it's honestly one of the primary reasons why I'm here and I want to be here, is as an extroverted introvert, I love it and I hate it. No, I don't want to say hate, because I actually don't hate it. I love it, and it also doesn't necessarily feed me. But then I want to backtrack on that of it totally feeds me. I love it, and I also yearn for something else. I yearn for that quietness. I yearn for that undisturbedness. I yearn to not be interrupted. Yet I don't think that it's from another. But while I do think it's from another, in my other side of my brain, I continually try to fight this. And this is where I believe it's a spiritual narcissism, if you will. And I feel like all of us spiritual beings, spiritual beings is such a nebulous term. I feel like a spiritual being is just someone who's learning about their own divine connection. But spiritual narcissism, which I really believe we almost have to be able to get through this density of this matter, is that spiritual narcissism gives us the ego to be able to balance both, because it is a opposition, if you will. So this is what spiritual narcissism would look like. You are, let's say, at home, and you have people continually stopping by your place, or you unannounced, or you are walking down your dirt road, let's say if you live in the country. And I remember this happening a lot, and people would always stop by, obviously in a neighborly, loving way, and say hi and talk. And then it'd be like 2 hours and you're still talking. And maybe you're doing less talking and they're doing more talking. But chances are with me, I was just as much talking as they were. And then you realize your day is shot to hell and you haven't gotten anything of your spiritual walk in or whatever you planned to do. So here's the will. There's the will, the egoic will of wanting, of having a desire, whether we label it spiritual or not, doesn't matter. But it's the will, it's the wanting of how I believe it should be. So all these, quote, interruptions, as they're not interruptions, but they appear as interruptions. They appear that we have no boundaries, that people are crossing a line. People are coming into our space, and we are either not strong enough to remove them, or they can't see our red tape. Another way that this shows up is that people who maybe want to be friends or just take up a lot of your, quote, time or energy. A lot of times we'll always think that, like, oh gosh, that person exhausts me, or that person, takes a lot of my energy, or stuff like that. And that we turn it to ourselves of, oh, we don't have strong enough boundaries, or, oh, we got to avoid that person, or, oh, that person, and I don't jive, or da 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 da. This is still your will, and it's sneaky. It looks like we're not doing something that we should. we rarely consider that these people are our messengers. It doesn't mean, what I'm talking about, it doesn't mean that we continue letting it play out. That's not it at all. What it means is to be able to receive the message. The message is never about a propagation of what you want, of getting more of your boundaries, of getting more stronger in your voice. Those are addendums. Those are accessories. That is not the full part. That is feeding and nurturing the ego. The ego does need to be nurtured. It doesn't need to be trash talked. It doesn't need to be kicked out. It's to be useful, but we're not necessarily using it. We're using it as the full cover story. So let's take somebody who you don't necessarily get along with. Somebody who just feels like they take your energy. This isn't someone who's mean. This isn't somebody who I'm talking about how you're like, hey, you are not allowed in my space. That's different. This is somebody who you get slightly aggravated with. But the problem with us, with spiritual narcissism, is that we believe that we are the universe doing its job. We're not understanding that the universe is our bigger self already doing the job, bringing this person here. We believe that we must be separate from this because this doesn't feel good. And we are so obsessed with feeling good instead of using what doesn't feel good as the medicine of this moment. Let's just sit with that. Maybe replay that for a second. I think I will too. Who these people are in our lives are actual messengers. Messengers rarely come as amazing interludes and inspiring. Those are cheerleaders. Those aren't messengers. Messengers get you to do inquiry. They're getting you to understand and do your own inquiry of why you're here. Why is this aggravating me? Doing inquiry on yourself of why you're having this allergic reaction to this person, to this situation, to this energy. It's not about making better boundaries. It's about making better connections. And it's not necessarily connections just tied to others. It's connections and synapses within yourself. People are so perfect, exactly as they are, including ourselves. But we are constantly trying to solve and fix something that doesn't even exist, instead of fixing our reaction to it. And it's kind of like the Rumis, the Sufis, the gurus, the consciousness, the understanding of accepting all, accepting every single thing that comes into your life, whether you want it or not. That's irrelevant. And chances are we don't want it. That should be a very good ding, 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 like a doorbell. You might be exhausted. You might be exhausted from having to protect yourself. You might be exhausted from having people cross your boundaries. And that means you're in the way. You're laying down. They're trampling on you because you think that you are the boundary. And then they're just going to step right over you. Jump up. Get alive. Hug them. Shake their hand. Welcome them. It's just like the saying, welcome everything to your table. Open your doors. Even if you want to be solo and you want to feel that quietness. This is all I yearned for. My entire life was quietness. And then I realized I'm inside my head. I've locked myself in. The loudness is inside of me. It's not outside of me. I still forget that again and again. Our journey here is to accept everything as our messengers, everything. And the things that are possibly ugly, the things that are possibly uncomfortable, the things that aren't warm and fuzzy, that might be a very sharp, cold dagger of air. Accept it, welcome it, love it for what it is. It doesn't mean that you have to make a bed and let it sleep over, but welcome it. Maybe you're just sitting on your porch with it because you're going to feel such gratitude that you even have a porch. Everything and everyone is a blessing. And I know that I learned that so intentionally when I went through that whole landslide, the after effects. When everything was erased, only then could everything be welcomed. And it could never take its place. In fact, there was no space to have anything in its place. That space was erased. It was dead. It didn't even exist. So even to this day, I have the offering of life itself. And it is no longer from a physical perspective. And that's relieving. Even though there's parts that I maybe need it, I am so grateful I don't have to go through that part any longer. So, for example, in the beginning, what I'm talking about, it was a very physical receptivity, whether it was financial. I mean, I literally had nothing. My whole, family, me, Steve, my kids, and I, and we had no job. We just lost everything. And when you have no house, no clothes, no car, no vehicle, yet I had tons of keys. I'll never forget that. I remember having an enormous amounts of keys on my keychain. To nothing, to a possibility. And almost 4 years later, I'm still in this situation. It's changed dramatically, but it hasn't completed itself. It hasn't been of where I have really anything. I'm in the temporary timestamp, if you will. And I'm also at a severe, again, great loss of job pausing and financial zeroness, but I'm in a totally different mental space. So all those life happenings, as you will, they don't affect me the way they did then. So then, we'll call it just then, 3.5 years prior, I was in a place of great receptivity, something I actually hated. It was one of the worst feelings to have to go through and to experience and to learn. Most people think, oh, that can't be bad of people saving you. It was horrifying because you had to rely on divinity for those people to show up, and then make sure that you are so purely okay, which we are never okay with having to receive so humbly and unconditionally. So we usually think that other people are putting the conditions on money, which they did. And pretty much, I would say it was like a 50% of that, whether they knew it or not. It wasn't like purposeful. But there was always a condition. There was always, people can't help but do that. We're all like that. I was probably like that, we're not even aware of that, because for us, money is something that we monitor. It's something that we control, of the intake, of the outpouring, whatever. So when we have conditions on money, we can't give it unconditionally. So I had this outpouring of having to understand and learn how to be receptive when I had no choice but to be receptive. And doing that in strength while I'm completely shattered and broken. And when that happens, you have to be so vulnerably open in a way that it almost looks like you're not allowed to have an opinion. You're not allowed to say no. You're not allowed to, it appears, even to myself, that you're not allowed to have boundaries. And in some ways, that's true. I wasn't allowed to say, hey, don't stop over, or hey, I'm healing, because what was being given was necessary to show up in the moment outside my control. If I was bawling and, which was the majority of my day, or like a zombie, or checking out, or mentally looking like I was not alive, and people stopped over and maybe we had a little chat, I had to be exactly that. I was not allowed, universe would not allow, source would not allow me the opportunity and the luxury and the spiritual narcissism to protect myself. I was not supposed to be anything different than completely, wildly vulnerable in the eyes of all. I had no protection. This was specific and purposeful. This was showing how to do it. But what happens is when we don't have as much of a crisis as the big crises, when we have more of those micro crises, usually that is more of things that are dealing with our health, meaning we're not having full-blown cancer, we're just having, autoimmune things, or we're having, I don't know, trauma about some organ or whatever. So we're having more micro ones that last longer. They're not cutthroat kind of situations. When we have these types of situations, or let's say emotional things, or physical things, like I'm having a problem with ... Let's say my job, or I'm having a problem with a person, or, all these micro challenges, we will exercise that spiritual narcissism, and it will come into play, I think, in too much of a way. And we don't even realizing it. And we're calling this more as courage. And I think this is the irony part, which I don't hear people talking about. And maybe because we haven't really understood this yet, as I call it, downloads and epiphanies. I don't know this, this is just me talking out loud and it's just coming through. But this showing up, this showing up that's arriving to us is giving us an invitation to actually use and drink its medicine. And the irony is that we're trying to put limitations and red tape on our own story. We're basically doing the universe's job. It's no longer a welcoming. It's saying, well, if I have to gather courage, I need to draw a line in the sand. I need to state my boundaries. I need to go and remove ... I need to get in control of this. And it's spiritualizing that and putting kind of a very glittery sheen on it to make it as if it's not coming from my ego. But the fact is, it is. It's coming from your ego because you are afraid that the universe is not going to do its job. You're afraid that you're going to be plummeted by so-and-so. Instead, what if we were to go and use the courage for ourselves of, I can hear anything this person says and not take it on myself. I can radically listen and be so open and so vulnerable and be strong in that vulnerability, to not believe what is being said, but to love them so unconditionally and so gratefully that they are spewing things that shouldn't have met my ears. So we are taking our protective measures, our spiritual narcissism that we have to do the universe's job, that we have to go and protect and barricade ourselves, callous our embodiment to be spiritual warriors. Against what? Warriors need something to fight against and even stand up for. And I don't know about you, but that doesn't work. That works for a time being. That works almost to get into your spirituality, merging the ego and the non-identity, the spirituality, if you want to call it that. But that's not it. That's not the epiphany. That's bringing the density of human understanding to your spiritual plate. The higher consciousness of this understanding of what you invite in is you're asking everything. You're saying yes to everything. And like I said before, all you're saying yes to is them sitting at your table. You're not saying yes to them sleeping in your bed. Yes to sitting at my table. What do you do when you sit at the table? You talk. You listen. You conversate. You communicate. And really deeply, if you really have a guest and you want to treat them as a guest, you really deeply listen without taking it upon yourself. Even if it's showing up as everything about you. It's not. And it is. Isn't it delicious? But when you drink that medicine, when you use that medicine, you thank it for being for you. It's not about you. It's for you. You're taking every single molecule of what they're offering and splicing it into your own little sugar pill to be able to shift and alleviate your own pain into understanding and beautiful magic. Because you're the shaman, you're the doctor, you're the sick person, you're the healer. Doesn't even matter if you welcome them or not. You're actually seeing part of yourself. You're accepting and allowing this other part of yourself at your table. And you're listening intently. And it's not for even more understanding. It's for wild acceptance. Let them go and bring up everything. Let them invite you to meet you. Because then you realize that nobody's really at your table. And then at the same sense, it's a full house. So I guess the message of this story is to really eat in front of the TV as a TV dinner, have a big giant house where everyone sits down to eat. Eat in your bedroom as I do because I love silence when I'm eating. I am so not a 1950s mother. But do whatever works for you. And then on top of that, invite allowance. Be wildly open to what's showing up. Don't judge any of it. Because as soon as we do, that's the spiritual narcissism. That's its righteousness. Rather be curious. Invite the possibility of learning something more than just what you think. And let chaos be whatever it is. Be free to be you. That's the offering to another, and really genuinely to yourself. All my love.